welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to take a look at the Transformers Selects Legacy Evolution Deluxe Class Magnificus. And if you're wondering what mold this is, it's actually the 86 Perceptor mold, which unfortunately I do not have that figure in my collection. So for me, this is actually a brand new figure. And if you're wondering the differences between the molds, I think the only change with this one is the head sculpt, and I think everything else is of course a slight color and deco change. But let's start off by taking a look at the packaging. So of course we have the blueprint there of Magnificus. Unfortunately, he does not have his telescope on his shoulder. I really would have liked to see that. And of course we have those all those lines and angles looking very cool. This is of course the new Legacy Select style packaging, but of course this is an evolution figure, so it's really cool how they added that evolution text there, which is really exciting to see. So this is actually my first Legacy Evolution figure starting the new line or wave, which is super exciting to see. And of course if we do flip to the bottom, we have the Magnificus, the name of the figure, the seal of course, and of course on the top we have the Transformers Legacy Evolution, looking very cool there. And if we do flip to the side, we do have a Decepticon symbol, the continuation of the figure, really his shoulder and arm. And of course, this back overall pretty plain, just some lines there. On this side, all of that, the plastic-free packaging in several different languages. And that is pretty much it for the packaging, so let's now get into the review. Here we have Magnificus in his turret mode. Let's start off by taking a look at the details. Of course, I'm not going to spend that much time on this mode because a lot of the details actually carry over into the telescope, so I really don't want to say them here and of course repeat them again later. So I'm just going to briefly take a look at this because this is my least favorite mode of the figure. I think it's most people's least favorite mode of the figure. It's an okay turret, so detail-wise, of course, there's some really nice silver at the front. This really nice kind of creamish, grayish white mixture they use for these sections here. I actually really do like its color. I don't see them used that much. Of course, we have this really nice tread detailing they used on the side. Of course, there's some here and on the other side, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, there is no rolling wheels, but that's actually to be expected. But actually really nice. There is a classic Decepticon symbol, of course, on the turret section there. Really dark black plastic, and there's some glossy black paint there as well. And some really nice circuitry detailing on the side. Of course, this also acts as the telescope and the telescope mode. I think most people caught that already. But it's an okay mode. Definitely, I would say a throwaway kind of third mode. It's really a bonus, I would say, because of course most selects, as we know, only come with the robot and the alt, so this is sort of a bonus extra mode that they included. And if you're wondering the history or the origin of this mode, I could be wrong, but my guess is I think this is a reference to a G1 Perceptor mode. I think when the first figure Perceptor came out, or one of them, I think he had sort of a turret blaster mode that was included, and I think this is sort of a reference to it. That's my guess. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comment section down below and where this came from, but I think that's what I've heard. I think it's a reference to a Perceptor figure that was made a while ago, and they wanted to of course make a reference and have some nostalgia included. And yeah, it's okay. I'm fine that it's just a throwaway okay mode, because of course the main attraction of this figure is the robot and telescope, and I think they're actually two really good modes, so it's fine if they want to include a bonus one that's just not as good. I think I'm perfectly fine with that. But that is pretty much all there is to say. I don't really have a lot of ideas or thoughts about it. It's just an okay mode, but of course storage wise for the accessory, you can store his blaster on the side, which I actually do quite like. It is blaster piece compatible. Unfortunately the turret section is not, but there's a really cool ammo clip there, and it's done in black. And make sure you have a good grip on it, so there you use of course the handle or the peg there, and you use that port on the side of this blaster and you plug that right into place. So make sure you have a really good grip on it, because you don't want to have this thing go flying, and you plug that into place. So of course you can attach the blaster there. It's okay storage. I don't really know where else they could put it. Maybe on the side of this section here, that'd be pretty nice. But that's pretty much it for storage. Of course, articulation, there's really only this section here. You can maneuver the cannon, which again acts as the telescope. And I do have to say that is kind of disappointing. Unfortunately, you cannot move the telescope or turret side to side. That's a bit unfortunate. I was really hoping that was included as well. I actually do have the Titan's Return Perceptor to have a comparison for, of course, when he's in his telescope and robot mode. Again, if you missed my intro, I don't have the 86 Perceptor at this time, so I won't be able to make that comparison. So I kind of filled it in with a previous Perceptor figure that they made, and he actually had full rotation in his telescope. You could actually remove the telescope from it. It was actually an accessory. They counted as an accessory. It came with the blaster and, of course, the telescope. So if you wanted the figure to be without it, you could remove it, which I actually think was a pretty nice option. And just saying now, I do like the design and mold of this telescope better. I think the size of it is a lot better, and the time to turn line, the telescope with him was huge. It was so oversized, the proportion was so bad. So I will admit the design of this is better, but the articulation in the time to turn one is definitely superior because you can move it side to side. Yes, it can move up and down, but yeah, kind of limited there. But overall, a pretty subpar, okay extra mode. And that is pretty much all there is to say. I really don't have much to compare to, so I will, of course, have some comparisons when he's in his robot and telescope mode. So let's actually transform him into the telescope right now. It's actually just a few steps, so we can do that pretty quick. So just remove the blaster. You don't want that on there. And what you're going to want to do, of course, make sure you pay attention because you can transform it in like 5 seconds. You're going to get the telescope and just move this like that. And you can actually flip this around, have this faced up like this, and you can get these entire side sections here and remove them. And how these were tabbed in is there is a post here and there is a port on this section here. And you're going to, of course, flip back to the front. You can just flip this down and make sure this entire bottom section is flat, so of course the telescope will be uneven and kind of wobbly. And you're going to, of course, rotate this other one like this, and there we have Magnificus in his telescope mode. And yes, very, very quick transformation. So let's quickly take a look at the details, and of course we will get into some comparisons, of course, especially with the times return perceptor, which I do have. So detail-wise, I actually really, really do like this telescope. I think they definitely nailed it, which again, it really hurts that there is no side-to-side rotation. I always really like that feature with the times return version, but unfortunately you can only move it up and down, which I think some people could argue, why do you need to move the telescope side to side? Yes, that's a good argument, but I think it's just really needed. I think they definitely could have included it here. But detail-wise, of course, we have the telescope itself, really nice classic Decepticon symbol there. Of course, the really nice kind of grayish whites, the black there. I actually really do like all these little ridges. And of course, if you do flip to the back, we do have some really nice clear, transparent clear plastic there, of course, as acting for the lens, which you can look through. I haven't looked through it yet. I'm not sure if it's actually a good telescope or not. I don't know. And unfortunately, this is actually not a working knob. If you don't know, the times return perceptor, I'm mentioning again, he actually had a working telescope, of course. No, the lens was actually not a quality one you could look through, but if you actually turned a knob on it, it could actually extend and, of course, retract, which I thought was the coolest feature. I'll show you, of course, once I bring it out, but that would have been nice if they include on this one, but I think the reason why they couldn't is, of course, it's too slender. That's really the main reason why the times return telescope was so huge. It had to include that working feature, so it was so chunky and oversized. There was a bit of a cost to having that feature, but it's okay that they didn't include it in here. But overall, a very cute, cool looking telescope, of course. Some very, very plain black on the sides. You pretty much, of course, flipped these sections inside out for this mode, so the tank treads are the inside now. Of course, they have the little dish, so he can look at some things. Of course, you could look at his blaster to repair it if you want to, or put some small weapons or accessories there if you want to create a pretty cool scene. Overall, very plain, but I actually do quite like it. There's some really nice kind of paneling and circuitry detailing. If you zoom in there, that actually looks really cool in my opinion. And of course, pretty plain on the side, but actually virtually no kibble, no hollowness on the back. Pretty filled in, pretty plain, and I actually do quite like it. So accessory storage wise, what they show in the instructions is, of course, there's mech type ports everywhere, but for the instructions you use this peg, and of course there is a port right there, and you're supposed to plug this in like that, and you're supposed to face it back, which I think that looks dumb, but that's how they showed it. There is some ports on the side. I'm not sure if those are compatible. Those are screw holes, I'm pretty sure, but that's how they showed it. But I'm going to remove it because I think that looks ridiculous in my opinion. But that's pretty much it for accessory storage. I do have one other complaint. Unfortunately, on this copy, the legs, these are actually the legs, they do not lock into place. They just kind of sit there, which I'm fine that they're like this. It looks cool, but I would have liked it if there was like a tab to keep them in place, because they kind of just can move everywhere. And that is something I have to say has improved or is better on the time return version. They actually did lock into place. But that's pretty much it for the details. And again, articulation, you have, of course, the movement of the telescope, and that's pretty much it. Of course, you can move the little bases of the telescope if you want to, but I really wouldn't. But yeah, pretty much it for details and articulation. Of course, accessory storage, not the greatest, but that doesn't bother me whatsoever, because honestly, a telescope with a blaster I think is a bit silly. But here he is with really my only other telescope bought. Here he is with the Titan Return Perceptor, so I will make some more robot mode comparisons, definitely some more. As for this mode, this is really all I could think of. I do apologize, I don't have the 86 Perceptor, so I didn't really know what else to compare him to, but I'm actually really glad I have the Titan Return one. Of course, very different from them, mold-wise, of course, completely different. He has that whole head gimmick. As you can see, this one is actually much more compact and slender. This is much more spread out. As you can see, of course, the telescope itself is huge compared to this one, and if you wanted to see that really cool gimmick with this version, if you got this little section here, you could of course compress and extend the lens, which I thought was a pretty cool feature that I'm really glad they included. But of course, again, it does come at a cost, because it does make the telescope absolutely massive. But as you can see, mold wise, again, completely different, but they actually do look pretty cool next to each other. And actually, I might give the 86 Perceptor a chance, because I actually do quite like this figure. I passed it up a while ago because I had the Titan's Return version, but honestly, I think there is some things that they did improve, but there is some things that did not improve. As you can see, of course, the legs actually do tab into place. They're locked in place, which I actually do quite like. Unfortunately, with this one, not so. But it doesn't really bother me, because, of course, you're not really, I would say, going to play with the telescope. You kind of use it for display, I would say. So, but overall, they do look pretty cool next to each other. Really, here's a back view, as you can see. Overall, pretty plain on both. A side view, as you can see. They do look pretty cool next to each other. Which one do I like more? I'm not really sure. They both have their pros and cons. I actually do like the more spread out look of this one. I think it is more realistic. But with this one, I think everything else is more secure. There is some areas on this one that don't want to tab into place as good as they should, as good as I'd like them. So there is a few pros and cons to them. One thing that is much better on this one is this can actually move side to side, full rotation. So I really would have liked if they included that with this one. Unfortunately, not so, but, you know, it's fine. I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, but that is pretty much it for this mode. Overall, really cool telescope mode. Let me know, of course, what you think of this telescope in the comment section down below. And of course, let me know in the comment section down below which version of this mold do you like more. Do you like Magnificus or, of course, Perceptor? I actually might give that figure a chance. So let's now get down to transformation into the robot mode. Let's now get down to transformation into the robot mode. So what you're going to do is get the telescope. You can just move this up. You can get the chest piece, and as you can see, of course, there is 2 tabs, and there is slots on the inside of this piece. You can just tab this into place like that, and then you can now go to the legs. You're going to get this entire section, hinge that out. You can then flip the foot up like that. So you can then get this entire assembly, hinge this down, and there we have one leg all done. Do the same thing on the other side. So hinge that out, flip the foot up, hinge this forward and down, and there we have the legs all done. Then what you're going to do is untab the arms from the main telescope section and hinge these out. And then what you're going to do is rotate at that ball joint like this. And then you're going to get this entire assembly piece, which is tabbed into the telescope. You're going to untab that and get this piece, hinge that down, which will then, of course, get this tab here, and that will tab into the entire shoulder like that. And this one is slightly different because, of course, it's attached to the telescope, so you're just going to hinge this down like that, and then you're going to flip this up like that. And then again, there is a tab and slot that will tab into place. And then you can flip out the hands like that, flip them out. As for the last step, you can just flip the head up, which is very tucked in there. Just flip that up like that. And then, of course, the last step you need to do is rotate his head around. And there we have Magnificus in his robot mode. Overall, looking very cool. Let's take a look at the details. Here we have Magnificus in his robot mode. Let's take a look at the details, starting at the very top with that head sculpt. Some really nice yellow for the eyes, some black for the main helmet section, and some silver for the mouth plate and that really cool crest. That actually looks really nice. Of course, if we go to the arms, some really nice black for the shoulder, and really do like the kind of knobs that they put on the forms. Of course, I think these are supposed to be the knobs that you would use on a telescope, of course, to zoom in and look at an object. I'm really glad how they recreated that, of course, from the actual telescope and put it here on the form. That actually looks really nice in the creamy kind of grayish white there, and of course some more gray for the rest of the form and some black for the hands. Same detail repeated on the other arm. I actually really do like this chest detail, the clear plastic with the red seeing through there. That actually looks really nice. There's some really nice detail through there, and if you of course wanted a better look, you can open this up. That's really due to transformation though. As for the stomach, some more of that kind of grayish white with the classic Decepticon symbol there, looking very, very nice. Some more black for the hips and crotch, and some silver. I almost forgot to mention some silver actually around that entire stomach section. That actually looks really nice. As for the legs, overall pretty plain, done in gray and black, but some really nice sculpted in detailing. And if you want to, you can actually go on the inside of the leg and you can see that really nice tread detailing on there, which looks really nice. Overall, kibble wise, there's like not kibble whatsoever. Of course, if you want to count the telescope, you can, but I don't count that. There is a bit of hollowness. There's a little hollow gap there. That's actually due to transformation. That's where the head folds into place, but everything else pretty well filled in. Of course, the typical hollow gaps in the forms where you put in the hand-ins, that's kind of expected by now, but not much waffling, as you can see, pretty filled in on the inside of the legs. So I think they did a pretty good job with this figure, and detail-wise, actually very impressed. Of course, the same details as I mentioned 2 times before with the telescope, the Decepticon symbol, the black, and that really nice kind of grayish whites. And I actually really do like this figure. So tolerances-wise, I do have to mention it now before I get into articulation. There's one that's pretty annoying. Unfortunately, on the shoulders, they do really not want to tab into place. During transformation, as I mentioned, of course, they tab in slots, and it's supposed to tab into place. It does not. Any time I want to like move the figure or kind of mess with it, they always untab. This one is a little tiny bit tighter than this one, so I do apologize if I have to constantly keep fixing that. Other than that, I would say there's a slight tolerance, so due to transformation, these can actually hinge in and out, so when posing it around, it can be annoying because they typically will want to like misalign like that, so it would have been nice if there was like a locking mechanism or something to make it more stay in place, but I wouldn't really say that's a tolerance issue. That's just, of course, the design of the mold itself. This shoulder thing, that's a tolerance issue that should be fixed, but everything else is actually very tight. The ball joints at the shoulder are actually extremely tight on my copy, which is pretty good. They're not, of course, to the point where it's bad that they're tight. It's actually really good for posing them around. So, of course, articulation-wise, he's actually pretty good. So, of course, if you go to the shoulder, full rotation there, again, that untabbed. Out to the side, there is a bicep swivel and elbow bend to the pretty standard 90 degree. Unfortunately, no wrist rotation, but that's to be expected considering that gap, but you can hinge it in if you want to. Full waist rotation, the leg can kick that far forward, that far back. There is a knee bend to a very, very good degree. And if you want to count this as articulation, you can move the leg in and out, but that's really due to transformation. A swivel at the top of the leg. There is a really good ankle pivot. Very, very good there. And I would say the last thing to do, of course, with the legs is he can do a full splits like that. And that's pretty much it for the legs. The last thing, which unfortunately is slightly hindered, is the head rotation. So I did save this for last because it's not that great. So it can look up and slightly down. It can move side to side, of course, pretty good this way. But considering there is that telescope there, it is pretty limited. If you want to, you can move this out to the side. That's really due to transformation. So it does have full rotation, but of course, as it is with that telescope there, it is pretty limited. With that there, but that is pretty much it. I think it's pretty standard for a deluxe size figure. Of course, very good articulation in the legs. It can bend several different ways, in weird ways. Probably none you're going to use for articulation, but a very, very good ankle pivots. I'd say the only thing that they can improve, of course, is unfortunately no wrist rotation, but that's actually kind of common for a deluxe right now. Actually, like the 3 past figures I reviewed, it was Dead End and Point Blank did not have a reverse rotation, so kind of common with the Deluxe, so I'm not too disappointed with that. But detail-wise and articulation, that is pretty much it. So, of course, his one accessory, if you're not counting the telescope, is his pistol, and of course, the main way he can store it is his hand, which I think looks pretty cool. So you can have him shooting his pistol, and I think that definitely works. I think this is a much better weapon than the one that came with the Tyrant Return version, because I will bring that out in just a second. He comes with this huge, ginormous rifle, which I don't think makes any sense for a scientist. They're not supposed to be a warrior, they're supposed to be a scientist, you know, and the pistol, of course, is just in case they get in a little bit of action. So I think this definitely suits this character and this mold much better. So let's now get down to some comparisons. So again, don't have 86 Perceptor, but I do have the Tyrant Return version. So here he is with the Tyrant Return Perceptor, and as you can see, his blaster is so big, way oversized in my opinion, and again, that telescope is way oversized as well. But here they are, and I think they do look very cool next to each other. And I do have to say already, the remote definitely so much better with this figure, in my opinion. Again, this is not Perceptor, but it is, of course, using the Perceptor mold, so I'm kind of counting as that right now, just for a place a filler. I might get the 86 one, not too sure. Actually, do let me know in the comment section down below. Are the tolerances pretty good on Perceptor? They're pretty good on this copy, so I do hope they are the same with that figure as well. But they do look pretty cool next to each other. As you can see, of course, there is actually some very huge similarities. As you can see, both have that kind of circular knob section on the form. Of course, the telescope, way oversized with this one. And another thing that I just realized, they both have the tank treads on the insides of the legs, which is a pretty cool thing. And also, they do have that really weird hinge here, which that's due to transformation. So they actually do transform pretty similarly. There is some differences here and there, but there is some similarities in transformation. And of course, the main difference is molds. And of course, he does have that whole Titan head gimmick. But there is some similarities, which is actually pretty surprising considering how far apart these figures are. This is, of course, 2021. You could honestly say 2023, because this was actually supposed to come out in January, but was pushed a little bit earlier, which is good. This one, Tyrant Return, I think like 5-6 years ago, so it's actually kind of cool how there's some similarities with figures that are so far apart. I actually do like the tank treads on this one better because these are actually painted. There is some treads, they're tucked inside, but this is paint. Those are actually sculpted in, which is pretty nice. I think that's a little bit better. So I think of the Perceptor, just imagining this as, of course, being Perceptor. If I do get him, I will definitely like this mold over that one, because of course details, articulation is better. Just the mold itself is really good, but again, there is some things they did do better on Perceptor. Like, I do like, again, the articulation with the whole telescope in the telescope mode, but the size is a huge problem. You can see it is absolutely massive, so there is some costs, and the weapon, as I mentioned before, is a much better fitting size for this one. This one hits the ground if you just have it in a neutral pose, but that is pretty much it for this comparison. Let me know what you think of these two in the comment section down below. Also, if you have both Magnificus and, of course, the Perceptor from the 86 line, which one do you like more? I do want to know that in the comment section down below. Now for some more comparisons. Here he is with a previously reviewed Deluxe Class Dead End, and I wanted to make a mainline Deluxe Class comparison because you can actually see the size. Yes, he is standing at a bit of an angle, but you can actually see he is a pretty big Deluxe. Of course, for people who already have the original version, doesn't come as a surprise at all. But for me, this is actually pretty cool. He's a pretty decently sized Deluxe, in my opinion. So that's pretty cool how good in size he is. But they do look pretty cool next to each other. And now I thought I'd do a Selects comparison. So here he is with the previous two Selects figures. Of course, these are both from Legacy. He is, of course, Legacy Evolution. Here we have, of course, Lift Tickets and DK3 Breaker. Just thought I'd do a kind of Selects comparison. I don't have the Cyclonus one. I actually did have it at a point, but it did have a major QC problem. It was actually missing a pin inside the arm, so I actually sent it back and never got one. So maybe I'll give that one another chance. Hopefully I won't have that same problem, but they do look pretty cool next to each other. in my opinion, and definitely by far, I'd say of the selects that have been released so far, of course, or if I have right now, I did actually, of course, open Cyclonus. I had him in hand. I, messed with him for a while, but honestly, even if I had him to stay in hand right now, I'd say probably my favorite of them all is this one. Yes, it's a brand new mold for me, but definitely the more interesting, because, of course, these are kind of repaints and remolds of each other. I wouldn't say they're that original. This one is a brand new mold. There's only one other version of it, so I think this is definitely the most original and interesting of the selects they've released in this legacy line so far. And of course, Cyclonus, really the only thing that's going for him is, of course, the sticker sheet, which none of us really like stickers, and of course the Minicon, which is just a repaint. So I have to say, definitely by far, this is the most interesting, and I think probably the one I like the most of the selects they've released. These two figures are pretty good, but I gotta admit, this one is a really good figure. That is pretty much it for the comparisons, so let's now get down to the final thoughts. Let's now get down to the final thoughts for the Transformers Selects Legacy Evolution Deluxe Class Magnificus. Let's start in the robot mode. I think overall it's a really good robot mode, and size-wise, actually very impressive. I did a comparison to Dead Ends, and of course I don't have the previous version, so it really came as a shock of how big for a deluxe this figure is. And of course, accessory-wise, I actually do quite like the pistol. I think the pistol definitely suits this mold and this character and figure much better than the previous Titans Return Preceptor. He came with this huge blaster, just way oversized, and just looked kind of weird in his hands. He's a scientist. Yes, he will get in some fights, but of course, that's probably his last resort. I really do like the telescope on his shoulder. I think it's much better size, again, than the previous Perceptor. That I have in the Titans Return line. He has this huge one, which of course he does have a really cool gimmick, which can, of course, zoom in the lens and out. So there is a gimmick, but it does sort of come at a cost. So honestly, in my opinion, probably I'd actually take the no gimmick over gimmick, because it does have him have a huge oversized telescope, which looks pretty weird on his shoulder, so I probably prefer that look in my opinion. Articulation is actually very good for a deluxe size figure. Really good articulation in the legs, which of course there's some really weird outroot movement for the legs, but that's really due to transformation, but everything else is pretty standard for a deluxe. Unfortunately, no wrist rotation, but that's kind of standard for a deluxe, because of course there's those open areas on the inside of the form, which of course they could fill those in, but it is really due to transformation, so kind of not possible with this type of figure. Everything else, again, very standard, good waist rotation, pretty good articulation in the arms, again, besides the wrists. Unfortunately, the head is slightly limited, of course, due to the telescope. You can move it due to transformation, but again, how it is right now, just as the base figure without moving anything, you can really only move the head to the other side, where with the telescope is not, to the other shoulder. So a bit unfortunate there, but pretty cool to pose, as you can see. And again, design-wise, I actually really do love the head sculpt. The yellow for the eyes actually looks super cool. It's kind of an odd color, of course, with the other colors, much darker black and grays and, dark whites. It's kind of an odd color to put for the eyes, but I actually really do like it. I think it looks really cool. Adds some pop to the figure, and really kind of makes the eyes much more noticeable and kind of scary. And I really do like that nice transparent plastic at the chest, and you can actually see some red detailing through there, which is pretty cool, and there's some really nice circuitry detailing in there. Another really nice detail that they added on this figure that the previous Perceptor didn't in the Titans Return line is I did do a comparison between the two, and there is actually some major similarities. The transformation is actually pretty similar, and actually where everything kind of ends up, of course, the mold completely different, but some of the design traits are quite similar. Both of them have this really cool kind of tread design on the inside of the leg, but of course on the Titans Return one, it is a painted tread. These are actually sculpted in treads onto the figure, which is a really nice touch that they did, and they could have easily painted them, but they're actually sculpted in, which is a really nice thing they did. I will give pros to the Titans Return one. He actually does have rolling wheels where his tank treads are. Again, they're painted, but there is some wheels in there, so there is a bit of a plus there, kind of up to your own personal preference if you want the wheels or not. Some people quite like those, but that is pretty much it for the robot mode. I actually really do quite like it. Came as a huge shock for us, the Lex figure, of course. It's a brand new mold to me, so this is kind of new territory. Of course, typically when we buy selects, they're typically repaints of an original figure that we already have, like lift Pickets and DK3 Breaker. I already had Trailbreaker and Hoist. I already knew what I was going to expect. Of course, yes, there was some paint apps and mold changes, but I already kind of knew what to expect, of course, for the robot mode and alt mode and tolerance-wise. This is a brand new figure to me, so it really definitely came as a shock, and I'm pretty impressed. Getting down to transformation into the telescope mode, really not that complex, actually pretty fun. It is kind of a bit of a pain to get the head in that whole crevice section. It can be a bit of a pain to put it in there. Also take it out because you don't want to scratch the paint. So do advise caution, just take your time. You don't want to scratch the paint or ruin the head sculpt. I haven't scratched it yet, so that's actually really good. And of course, telescope mode wise, I actually really do like it. It's very different from the previous Titan's Return version. It's much more spread out. The Titan's Return one is much more compressed. If you skip that part of the video, make sure you go back if you want to see that comparison. I think I definitely like this version more of the telescope wise. Yes, there is some pros to the previous version. Unfortunately, the legs or the tread areas for the telescope, they really don't tab it, and they kind of just sit there. Yes, it does look good as they are, just I really like if they locked into place, because typically when you pick up the figure or you move it around or you're messing with it, they typically will move, because of course they are the legs of the figure, so there's quite a bit of articulation and hinges in them. So it would have been nice if they locked into place. The Perceptor from Titan's Return actually does do that, so that is a bit of a plus there. But overall, design-wise, how it looks, I think it's much better than the Titan's Return version. Storage for the blaster, not the greatest, which, again, I mentioned earlier. Why would you have a blaster with a telescope? You can actually have them examine if you want to. There's a little kind of desk or area where you can put some things, some accessories, or pieces if you want to, which is a pretty cool thing if you want to have some cool pictures or a stop motion, which is really nice. And the telescope actually looks really good. Of course, it can hinge down. You can pretend you're looking through it. There's some clear plastic at the back, so it acts as a lens, which is really nice. And they did sculpt in a whole knob where you would zoom in. Unfortunately, on this figure, there is no zoom in feature, which I kind of expected that. The previous Titan's Return version does have that, but again, it does come at a cost. If this had that feature, the whole telescope would be much bigger. It would be huge, way oversized, and I would not like it as much. So it's kind of up to your own personal preference if you want that gimmick or not. Of course, if you don't, it's much more slender and looks better. If you do, it's really chunky and oversized. And overall, a really good telescope mode. Again, accessory storage, you kind of just slap it onto the side. It doesn't look the greatest, but honestly, I was never planning on storing that accessory there anyway. And also, I typically will store the figure in the robot mode, so it doesn't bother me that much. Getting down to the third mode. Of course, it's a throwaway mode. It's this sort of blaster turret mode that they included. I think it's a reference to a Perceptor figure. I think maybe it was the G1 Perceptor. I think a figure a while back when they made it had this sort of turret mode that they're making a reference to. If I'm wrong, fact check me in the comment section down below, but I think that's what the reference is to. It's sort of a reference to a previous Perceptor figure, I think. Which is just an okay throwaway mode. Doesn't bother me that it's bad, because of course I think the robot mode and the telescope mode are extremely solid, really good modes. So if they include a bonus mode, that's fine. It's a nice pleasant surprise, because of course, as we know, most deluxes only have 2 modes. So yes, it's a nice bonus, not the greatest mode. Will I be transferring it into that mode that much? Probably not, but if you, want to look at every once in a while, it's fun. It's a cool turret mode. Of course, you can see a lot of the details and traits from that mode are really just used from the telescope, because the transformation is only like 2 or 3 steps. It's very simple. You kind of just fold up the whole side leg pieces, and that's pretty much it. And the entire turret really is the telescope. I think it would have been nice if they actually incorporated the blaster into the turret better. I'm just kind of realizing that now. You can store the blaster on the side of the turret or telescope using that port there in that mode, which is nice, but I think it would have been cool if it could have incorporated into the whole barrel section if it was actually became the turret, which I'm not sure how they could have done that, but that would have been nice if they could. Just to make it a little bit more interesting, of course. Makes you tell apart that it's not the telescope, because as it is, of course, just looking at it, you can already tell what it is supposed to be and what it was and how they're transforming it into a turret. But overall, it's an okay mode. It doesn't bother me. I do like the tank tread detail. Unfortunately, there is no rolling wheels, but that's kind of, I was expecting there to be none. Overall, a very solid figure. I know a lot of people really just pass by the selects. Most people think they're just repaints, and yes, most of them are. With this one, again, I don't have the A6 one, but I think the only change in mold is this head sculpt, and honestly, that's pretty good, because most selects, they have zero mold change, like the Cyclonus, which I used to have, zero mold change, only the stickers, which people don't like, and of course the Minicon, which wasn't a new molded Minicon. And the previous two selects figures, I think those were just repaints as well. So, yes, repaints are good, but if you typically pass up selects because you're like, oh, I don't like repaints, honestly, I'd say give this one a chance, because it's a really good figure. Yes, I'm mostly praising this because it's a brand new figure for me, but honestly, even if you already have the 86 Perceptor, I think you're still going to like this, because I really like the head sculpt, really like the pistol, and it's really like the deco. The really dark grays and blacks are really good. Yes, there's a few problems. Honestly, if I have to say my biggest problem with this figure, unfortunately, there is no articulation. For the telescope, there's no side-to-side movement. It can look up and down in all three modes. Of course, if you want to put the telescope at an angle for this robot mode, you can. That's not really how it's shown in pictures, but you can. But I think it really hurts, especially in the telescope. And I think it hurts the most, and it kind of faults the figure the most, that there's no side-to-side movement with the telescope, considering this is a 2022/2023 figure, when it was like 2014 or earlier with Titan's Return. The Titan's Return Perceptor, he had side-to-side, he had a full 360 rotation, up and down, multiple hinges on the telescope, and that's a figure from like 5 or 6 years ago, I think. It could be even older than that. So it does kind of make you question, why can't it be on this? So that is, I would say, the biggest problem in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Some people might have others, but that's my biggest complaint, which, personally, me, yes, it's a problem, but it does not ruin the figure whatsoever. I think it's still a very solid figure that I highly recommend. Hope you enjoyed this review. Of course, much more content coming soon, and cross our fingers that I'm going to be getting Victory Saber very soon. I did back him. If you did not already know, I did back him, and hopefully he'll be coming maybe in the next 2 weeks. Hasbro said we're supposed to get it before the Death Source campaign ends, which is the 12th of December, so TikTok, because it started like the 2nd or 3rd of December as of recording this video, so hopefully it comes very soon. And of course, I will do a review on that. And I actually do want to let you know now, hopefully you watch this whole review and you're actually here to the end to listen to me. I will, of course, review it, but I'm actually going to spend quite a bit of time. I'm going to make this review like my best review ever. I'm going to take quality pictures. I'm going to do an unboxing in the same review. I'm going to do unboxing and a review in the same video. I'm going to do so many pictures, so many good comparisons. I'm going to try and make it like the best review I have ever made for you guys. So hopefully you will enjoy that review. I'm going to spend a lot of time in it, and hopefully you like it. So, of course, stay tuned for that Victory Saber review, of course, whenever we get it, so it's kind of up in the air right now. I heard a possible release date is the 5th, but who knows. Hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think of Magnificus in the comment section down below. Do you like this version or this mold over Perceptor, or do you like Perceptor more? Let me know in the comment section down below. Also, let me know, is Perceptor good? I might give him a shot. I've never really thought of getting him until now. I might give him a shot. And that's pretty much it for this review, so I'll see you next time.